Thank you, Sophia. We're here today, and I'm so proud to be here with my colleague, Senator Marsha Blackburn, who we work together on a lot of privacy and AI and quantum and a whole bunch of issues, and so appreciate working with her. Our Attorney General from Washington and the Attorney General from Tennessee. Thank you so much, Attorney General Scrimetti, for being with us as well. And they'll get a larger introduction in a minute. But we're here because members of the House and Senate are trying to write a reconciliation bill and determine that you could stop what are reasonable theft and fraud laws on the books in our states now, specifically by imposing a 10-year moratorium on the enforcement of state laws that protect their citizens from AI harm and responsible development of AI systems. As I mentioned, I'm joined by three people who know a lot about this and are working to try to get this language removed from the bills. I'm concerned because in Congress, those who wish to stop us from having these important laws on the books are using the reconciliation process, which isn't really meant to carry public policy. They're trying to prohibit policy that is already on the books. This either in the form of prohibiting states from enacting or enforcing AI laws or regulations, or a regulation of language that says temporarily pause those laws that are now on the books related to AI. Neither one of those are acceptable to me. We should be fighting to protect consumers, not enabling AI theft or fraud to happen. Last Congress, Senator Blackburn and I and our colleagues from the Commerce Committee worked to pass federal government role in AI innovation, safety, workforce development, but we weren't able to get them all the way through the Congress. And that is what we should work together on now to pass responsible legislation so the US can lead in AI. But AI can also bring other challenges to it. It can be used to supercharge fraud, rob musicians or artists, delay rights that go to creators of content, deny individuals access to essential goods or services. The states know this, and last year, 24 states enacted regulating AI in some way, and they have adopted these laws that fill the gap while we are waiting for federal action. Now Congress is threatening these laws, which will leave hundreds of millions of Americans vulnerable to AI harms by abolishing those state law protections. The moratorium would erase hundreds of state laws that protect Americans from harm. And I know that Attorney General Scrimetti will talk about one of them, the Elvis Act, that my colleague Senator Blackburn and I are not only trying to protect in this instance, but also trying to get it implemented as a federal law as well, which would stop the AI from impersonating artists. Believe me, I've run into constituents in my state who were subject to fraud cases where an individual was posing as Kevin Costner and extracted a fee from them, hoping that Kevin Costner and the fee being paid was going to visit them in and around SeaTac, Washington. So sad to hear of this situation. Attorney Brown will talk about Washington's law to basically stop the deceptive AI election practices. We know in New Hampshire, someone spoofed President Biden's voice, urging people or saying they didn't have to vote. And then Washington passed a law basically prohibiting these kinds of things. If this language is in the underlying bill of reconciliation passes, it would force that law on our books in Washington not to be implemented. There are other state laws that have been passed. Utah requires companies that use AI to interact with consumers in high-risk situations, like when a consumer is asked to give sensitive personal information. The Utah law says you have to basically tell the consumer that they are talking to a chat box, not a human, because that person, chat box, not person, is getting their personal information. In 17 states, including California, Indiana, Montana, have passed privacy laws that allow citizens to opt out of profiling done by AI systems that use consumer data to extract sensitive insights about those individuals. In the state of Colorado, San Francisco, and Philadelphia have passed laws, and Minnesota, that prohibit the use of AI to set rent. Basically, it's taking information and allowing landlords to collude on a price. And this law would also be interrupted if this underlying reconciliation language would stick in the bill. So, as I said, we should be fighting to protect consumers, not enabling AI theft or fraud. We have lots of work to do here in Congress to get AI right, and we should be given the chance to do that. I'll now turn to my colleague, Senator Blackburn, for her comments.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell, and thank you so much for the work that you have done on this issue and for pushing back on the proposed moratorium. As you said, this is not the type thing that we put into reconciliation bills. And we are working to move forward with legislation at the federal level, but we do not need a moratorium that would prohibit our states from stepping up and protecting citizens in their state. Now, the Elvis Act is very similar to that very first No Fakes Act that we had in place trying to pass last Congress. And we were thrilled when Tennessee moved forward with the Elvis Act that would give those protections to our fabulous creative community in Tennessee, our singers, our songwriters, our musicians, our authors, our publishers. And having a moratorium would prohibit our state from implementing that work. Now, the Elvis Act really is groundbreaking work, and it would put power back in the hands of all of these artists and singers and songwriters and musicians and authors, and it would give them a way to crack down on unlawful use of their name, their image, their likeness, and their voice. And as we know, for the creative community, that is indeed their stock in trade. And you can't just say we're not going to regulate or enforce state laws for a period of 10 years, because think of what would happen to individuals in that period of time. Someone could create an entire virtual you of them by using their name, their image, their likeness, and their voice to train large language models. And indeed, we need a national standard, but until we get it, it is our states that are standing in the gap. So we're continuing to look at policies that need to pass at the federal level. The COPIED Act that we have, the Kids Online Safety Act, all of these need to be moving forward. But until we do, we're grateful that the states have stepped up. I want to turn it over to our Tennessee Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti. He is doing such an aggressive job for us in Tennessee. He's not a native Tennessean. He grew up in Connecticut, Harvard Law trained, and as he became the Attorney General in our state, he's put the emphasis on having a litigation unit, having an investigative unit, and addressing those consumer protections that are so vital. And he's been one of the leaders in our nation in holding big tech accountable. So, General Skrmetti, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to everyone. It's great to be part of this bipartisan effort to protect American consumers. Technology moves fast, and unfortunately, the federal government does not. And we are at this incredible inflection point for AI, where it is becoming a huge part of all sorts of consumer-facing products. A lot of them are obvious, some of them are not, and it's moving so fast that we don't know where it's going to end up. But you see state laws that are being passed to try to keep up with this. The Elvis Act in Tennessee to protect the creative output of our world-class creators who work really hard to do meaningful things to enhance the world and who don't want those efforts to be taken by AI. We are also seeing AI come up in a lot of our more traditional consumer protection type work. They're in AgriStats, which is a case where meat and poultry producers were using AI to price fix, and it resulted in higher prices at the grocery store for consumers when they went to buy chicken or turkey or pork products. Or RealPage, where you had rents that were artificially pushed up through the use of AI collusion. Now, some of our traditional laws clearly encompass this behavior, and we would have an argument under the exception in the moratorium. But the AI products are getting so sophisticated and so creative that there is no guarantee that we would be able to keep up using existing tools. And there would be arguments out there for the big tech companies that the moratorium does, in fact, preclude any enforcement of any consumer protection laws if there's an AI component to the product that we're looking at. Now, we've seen with social media that there have been abuses that took a long time to be addressed by the governments. The states are moving now. We've seen real harms to children that could have been precluded if we were more agile. AI is such a more powerful and potentially influential technology than social media. And it is a great thing. We want America to be AI dominant. We want to make sure that our adversaries don't get ahead of us, but we need to make sure that in the process, we're not leaving American consumers behind. And if there's a 10-year moratorium on state enforcement, that effectively means 10 years where we are at the mercy of the judgment of big tech. And we have no guarantees that they will be responsible with the incredible power this would give them. Our nation is built on checks and balances, and we have to be sure that the states are in a position to fulfill their mandate of protecting their citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. Now we'll turn to Attorney General from Washington, Nick Brown, who was counsel to our former Governor, Jay Inslee, also a legal career in the Army JAG Corps, and has been a prosecutor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Senator Cantwell, and kudos to you and Senator Blackburn for hosting this opportunity. And it's great to be with my colleague, General Scametti from Tennessee. I really just want to echo many of the comments that have already been said. And first and foremost, I think we all recognize the tremendous value that AI can provide to our states and to this country. And being in Washington, we have so many tech industries here that are leading some of the innovative developments in this field. But we also have to recognize many of the potential harms that come from AI across our states and across this country, and why it's vitally important that states continue to be those laboratories of democracy as we figure out the best way to both regulate and protect people in our states. And as Senator Cantwell mentioned earlier, this law that's being proposed as part of the reconciliation package would undermine, if not outright prohibit, so many existing laws in our states, including here in Washington. And there are a few that give me real concern that we would not be able to operate moving forward. First is the one that Senator Cantwell mentioned, that Washington has a law that that prohibits deepfakes being used against political candidates by mimicking their appearance and their speech, and provides a right of action when that is being used. And in this particular environment where we see so much misinformation, we want to make sure that states have the opportunity to regulate that. We also have a law that prohibits sharing fabricated sexual images without consent and provides for penalties for those who possess and distribute such images. That law would be undermined and invalid if this was to pass in Congress. We also have a law that prohibits the knowing distribution of forged digital likenesses that can be used to harm or defraud people. All of those laws, in my reading, would be invalid if this was to pass through Congress. And each of those laws are prohibiting and protecting people here in our state. I think we all recognize that the federal government has the ability to preempt state regulation of AI, but they really shouldn't do that when there's no other protections at the federal level. And, to do this ban without any federal regulation really could be potentially harmful to our states. In Washington, we had a law that was passed in 2024 that created a AI task force in the Attorney General's office. And we've taken that and run for the last year with many, many different stakeholders across different industries to help us study and research the impacts of AI and develop good regulations at a state-based level. And there's a number of subcommittees that are part of that work in our task force here in the office that are really providing good information for not only our agency, but for the public moving forward. That includes ethical AI governance. That includes protections for labor and workforce. We see so many potential violations and abuses against people that are working hard in our companies. It includes protections in the healthcare industry, housing industry, and so many different areas. And one of the areas that I was really concerned about coming in as a new Attorney General is how we can do more to protect the children in our state. And we advanced a piece of legislation this year that would require tech companies, and particularly those that are using social media to target and harm our children. They would prohibit them from using algorithms to target and generate harmful conduct for our children or content for our children. If we continue to move forward with that law, that would be preempted by this piece of legislation from Congress. And that gives me grave concern. You know, we have so much opportunity at a state level to move forward and innovate and have new ways to protect our kids and all of our residents. But we want to make sure that we have the ability to do that. And this piece of legislation that's being contemplated in Congress right now would not give us that ability. That's why it's really important that we raise alarm about this issue. And I'm really, again, pleased to see so much bipartisan engagement on this particular matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So great to have you with us today. We'll turn it, Sophia, to questions.
Perfect. Hi, folks. Again, if you could go ahead and use the chat function to identify your name and outlet, and then if you could also raise hand so I can see you on the attendees list. We'll get through as many questions as possible. We do have an afternoon vote to get to, but we'll try to get through as many as possible right now. Oh my goodness, seeing a lot coming through here. We're going to go ahead and start with Ben Brody from Punchbowl News.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. The question is, Senator Cantwell, Senator Blackburn, have you guys met with the parliamentarian about this yet, getting it out? And if not, when is that coming? And I apologize if this was dealt with in remarks already.
No, it wasn't, but I think today we did arguments in front of the parliamentarian.
And
Just today, just this afternoon. So they'll tell us later. I don't know when, but they'll tell us later.
great. Thank you so much.
Sophia, next question.
Yes, wonderful. We'll go ahead and go with Tom Pappert from the Tennessee Star. Tom, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to briefly ask if there's any concern about regulatory capture for some of the big tech agencies or big tech companies, sorry, in the various states.
I mean, I think from my perspective, the more states that are looking at these issues, the harder it is to see that kind of regulatory capture. And you have more facets of potential misconduct toward consumers addressed. The other issue is, regardless of the potential issues at the state level, I've seen Senator Blackburn working with her colleagues across the aisle for ages on the Kids Online Safety Act, which is addressing really serious harms. And even something like that takes a long time to move through Congress. If we're letting AI run essentially unchecked for 10 years and letting these companies push out more and more AI-oriented products, there's functionally no check. So whatever your concerns about the various state systems looking at these products, I think having the opportunity for the states to weigh in dramatically exceeds whatever benefit you get from cutting the states out of this.
Yeah, I think we're the ones who've been captured here in the halls of Congress with people wanting to pass either a weak privacy law just to overrun states, or in this case, sticking something in, like my colleague Senator Blackburn mentioned, a law, or maybe it was the Attorney General mentioning the fact that we're not replacing it with anything. We're just striking down and not having any standard. So I think that kind of action where people can just jam the American consumer in the dark of night by sticking language in the bill is the real concern.
Wonderful. We'll go ahead with Ashley Gold from Axios next.
Hi there, Senators Blackburn and Cantwell. Thank you for doing this. I'm wondering if you have spoken to Senator Cruz about this and expressed your reservations, and especially for Senator Blackburn, what is your sense of where other Senate Republicans stand here? And if this provision would have support, even if it does pass the parliamentarian. And sort of bigger picture, what does this mean for efforts for Congress going forward to get some federal regulation done?
Well, we've certainly let Senator Cruz and his team know that we don't support this language. And I may have mentioned, I didn't think I agreed with Marjorie Taylor Greene, our Congress counterpart on the other side of the Capitol much, but she also wants this language taken out. So I think a lot of people were just caught by surprise. A lot of members didn't know it was in there. Now that they are understanding that it's in there, they're assessing, or expressing their concerns. And I think what we're trying to communicate is obviously the fact that it overrides by the terminology so many things that are already on the books. And we think that is very problematic. So we definitely want to get the word out to people, even our colleagues who just may not have focused on this. There are just so many other things they may not have focused on it.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. We'll go ahead to MLEX with Emma Whitford.
Thanks for doing this. Yeah, just to follow up with Senator Blackburn, on that prior question, I'm curious, I feel like in the House, this was kind of presented as a partisan issue, with the exception maybe of Marjorie Taylor Greene and a few others. Is there growing consensus among Senate Republicans opposing this? And say it does survive the bird bath. I know you've been supportive of Trump's budget bill, the big, beautiful bill in general. Do you see a path forward for that bill with this pulled out of it? And I'm not sure where the president is on this measure, but would you, oppose it if it was something that he also supported?
So I don't know if Senator Blackburn's still on the call just because of where we have been with votes this afternoon, and people it's a short week this week. But I do believe that other people have expressed opposition. Other members will get you the list.
Thank you.
Perfect. We'll pass back to Kenzie Nguyen with Punchbowl.
Hi, sorry. Ben Brody already asked the question we were looking for. Thank you, though.
Fabulous. If there are other folks that are waiting to submit questions, please again identify your name and outlet in the chat and then raise hand. We're going to go ahead with Benty Birkeland from Colorado Public Radio. Sorry, folks, bouncing around on my screen. Let's see here. There we go, Benty.
Okay, thanks. Hi, this is Benta. Thanks for calling on me. It's a quick question on kind of the bird rule, adding that BEAD funding. Explain how that changes the situation, because I know earlier in the process, our U.S. senators in Colorado didn't think it would survive the bird rule. What is the calculation now on that?
Oh, I think they're trying to figure out some way to make it sound like it's just part of a budget process, when in reality, it's a huge change in public policy. And so they may be shopping to try to create some environment, but we're certainly arguing that this kind of budgetary policy should not include policy changes, and that this is a very big policy change, whether you tie it to BEAD or not.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to go to Bloomberg Government with Oma Sadiq. Oma, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. We'll give a second more. We'll go ahead to Nick McNess with WVLT.
Hey, thank you guys so much for doing this. My question's for the senator. I know there's lots of discussion about something this big being hidden in kind of one line late in the bill, and many voters saying they didn't have time to read the entire bill before Congress or the Senate voted on it. What do you think is something that could be done to kind of address this problem where, such large regulation is hidden and some people don't have time to read everything before they're supposed to vote on it?
Well, I certainly support having bills available, online. In the old days, they would be, presented and available at the desk, and you would have them, for some period of time. I'm happy to have that be 48 hours. I'm happy to be 72 hours. I think all of that is very important for the public.
Thank you.
Perfect. We'll go back to Bloomberg Gov.
Hi, thank you. Senator Cantwell, could you speak further to the impact this would have on BEAD funding to states if this were to get through?
Well, basically the attempt is just to say you can't have your BEAD dollars if you don't enforce this. And the BEAD process has been something that my colleagues in a bipartisan fashion implemented in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and they wanted a state process, and then that state process has now taken place. The blessings have been given to those projects, and we should move forward with them. They shouldn't be subject to this kind of hijacking a state saying, I'll only give you this money if you overrun Washington or Tennessee law. That makes no sense.
Thank you.
Perfect. We have time for just a couple more.
We got to get some AG questions in here. We got these very talented AGs. Got to get some questions into them.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead with Matt Masters from Williamson Scene.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This will be for the senators. Question for both of you. Just have you all had discussions with like individual discussions, in-person discussions with big tech leaders about this issue, especially those who've grown close to President Trump? And if so, what are y'all gleaning from those conversations?
Well, I think let's say this, that people want the United States to lead in AI. They want to be able to use a technology that they think could be so empowering, on things like healthcare, on national security, on a variety of manufacturing problems. So they're very excited about that. But obviously, there's elements of training large language models. My colleague Senator Blackburn mentioned, and so there's some complexity. So I do think that people just overreached here, thought that they could maybe just throw this in and people wouldn't notice it, and then really had no understanding of what it did to affect current laws on the books in states that are, very essential for protecting the public from fraud and abuse. So I do think that my guess is the White House probably doesn't even, with everything going on, probably doesn't even understand all the implications here. I doubt that they would. If the Attorney General called them and said, no, we really do want to overrun your state laws, I doubt that that's what they would say to him. I don't know if either of you, Attorney General, if you guys as an association have had any comments or outreach to the White House.
We haven't reached out directly to the White House. We did I think it was a 40 AG letter, bipartisan letter, expressing serious concern about how the moratorium would affect our ability to protect our people.
Yes, I was happy to join that letter as well. And that's our best way to communicate to Congress about the impacts here. And I just want to reemphasize a couple of things that have been said, but a 10-year ban on any sort of regulation is particularly silly in the light of the technology that we're talking about here. I mean, just think of the leaps and bounds that AI has had over the last couple of years, and the idea that we would not make any attempt to regulate a very fast moving environment for the next 10 years, and knowing how difficult it can be for Congress to reach agreement on some of these policy issues, it's really important that states be given that opportunity. And to echo what Senator Cantwell said, I find it really hard to believe that the people that passed this or put it into the legislation really fully understood that it would negate couple dozen, if not more, laws across the country and all of the various protections that those laws provide. So it's really important that Congress fully understand those impacts.
Perfect. Thank you. We have time for just 2 more questions before we got to get the senator back to the floor. But we're going to go ahead with Lauren from The Verge.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. This could be for either the AGs or the senator. But I'm wondering if there are any, if as you read this provision, if it would apply to any laws that go beyond things that look strictly like AI laws, things like having to do with algorithms or social media regulation, especially based on the language about automated decision making.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with this one. I think there's a real danger that it does just that. Some of the language that's used in this provision is extremely broad. You know, the definition of artificial intelligence and other things could be read to interpret, to prohibit things that are well beyond the AI sphere. So I think there's certainly that argument that people could make, and a real risk that it would undermine many, many different provisions beyond the AI scope.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen with Section 230, the tech industry's lawyers can read things very broadly. And when I read this moratorium, my immediate thought is this could kill the application of all of our consumer protection and antitrust laws, period, to essentially all technology. Now, I'm not conceding that that's the case, but certainly there will be arguments to that effect. And read broadly, this language just leaves us completely at the mercy of the tech companies with no possible state check on it. And then we have to hope that Congress is able to act fast. And with tremendous respect to the senators, that doesn't seem like a very good hope to rely on. Congress necessarily moves slow almost all the time. And without the states acting as the laboratory of democracy here, there's really nothing to stop the tech companies from doing whatever they want if the courts buy a broad reading of this.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go ahead for our last question from Jordan Hansen from the Daily Montanan.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I was just wondering, and this is for both of the AGs, but Montana and along with some other states, have laws targeting explicit generated content, specifically those on fake or simple people. I know a lot of these laws are kind of in the early stages, but just was wondering if you'd seen them making any impact and just kind of how big that issue is. Thank you.
Jordan, you're saying fake content, is that what you said?
Yes, like specifically the explicit fake content. There's just been a couple laws that have been passed around that from different states, and just was curious if those have had an impact.
I think it's hard to measure the deterrent effect, but I have to think it's there. I mean, we're seeing new products every week that can do unbelievable things. I mean, some of the video generative products out now are beyond miraculous. It's insane. And hopefully, as a result of those laws, there are guardrails baked in that prevent the worst abuses that we fear. But this is a technology still in its infancy. And the earlier the law can shape the contours of what products provide, the safer people will be. And if we lose the ability for the states to regulate that, Congress, even moving as fast as it can, will not be able to keep up with all of the risks. And you're going to see a lot of people get hurt.
Wonderful. Thanks. Senator Cantwell, if you have any closing thoughts.
No, just thanks to everybody for being on here, and thanks to the 2 AGs and my colleague, Senator Blackburn. So I think thank you for helping amplify. Lots of work to do here to get basically grab the opportunity of AI, but also to protect consumers. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.